Yeah, and let's just remind folks. I think a lot of folks, particularly on the left, I think they think that Julian Assange's crime was that he hacked the DNC emails or something like that. But that's not what he was accused of. Can you talk about what he was accused of? Because I think that also shed some light on the real motives behind his prosecution.
Well, yeah, so I was always careful to document, and so were his lawyers, the fact that he had exposed crimes committed by the United States government in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. One file, which I actually can claim a little bit of credit for exposing, involves how there was this attack on a compound in Iraq. In which there were people who were executed. There were innocent Iraqis who were basically marched out. They were like, gagged and blindfolded, I think, and then they were actually bombed. And this was covered by a UN human rights commissioner. I believe his name was Philip Alston. And it was documented, and it was in this communications log that was released as part of like the 250,000 or more US diplomatic cables that were disclosed by Chelsea Manning, the U.S. Army whistleblower who provided these materials to Assange and WikiLeaks. And this file, like, it just seemed like your average report on some kind of atrocity. We'd read a lot of things of that nature related to the Iraq War, but I circulated it. It got picked up by Democracy Now! I remember Glenn Greenwald covered it. And then slowly it started to take on a life of its own, and it was noticed. It made its way back to the Iraqi government, and the Iraqi government recognized that they were in a moment with Barack Obama and his administration where they could dictate the terms of the status of forces agreement, which is how the Iraqi government was going to handle U.S. soldiers staying in Iraq. And they basically said, we're no longer going to grant immunity to the U.S. soldiers who have been deployed here. And that was a deal breaker for Barack Obama. And so he accelerated George W. Bush's plan to withdraw troops from the country. And that ultimately is what brought the Iraq war to an end. So you could say that Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning had a role in ultimately ending this invasion and occupation that was built on lies from the very beginning by the Bush administration. And that's just one example. I mean, if you go through the cables and you go through the Afghanistan and Iraq war logs, and even if you look at the Guantanamo files, these detainee assessment reports that were released on the nearly 800 people who were put, through different black site prisons by the CIA and then brought to Guantanamo, you can see the extent of the lies and the deception and the corrupt dealings of the U.S. government globally. The men who were there, you could see details about children that were rounded up and brought to Guantanamo. You could see before it had actually become a very public issue, you could see how the U.S. government was hiding drone strikes from the world. And they had Yemen claim that they were responsible for the strikes so that the U.S. military didn't have to defend or justify what was being done. You could see things related to how they at the State Department act as sales people for Boeing to sell the jets. How the State Department isn't just out there doing diplomacy, but they'll go out and basically front for corporations and try to advance their businesses in different countries around the world, depress wages in Haiti, and fight all sorts of anti-corporate groups that were challenging businesses in the United States. And so there's torture that was detailed, there's war crimes, and then, at its core, you get to see the way in which diplomats from the United States government would go to great lengths in a very crooked manner to advance the agenda of the United States.
And that's why I love the title of your book. It's guilty of journalism. I mean, all those examples you just provided right there are the exact type of stories journalists should be procuring for the public. And so I think it's a great reminder of that. But it's also a great reminder of how whether it was a Democrat or Republican in office, they're willing to shed these principles if they have them of a free press because they thought this was a threat to their foreign policy agenda. And I think, it's a good lesson there.